Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Coder Career with myself, Cameron Blackwood, and my co-founder and co-host, Colin Riddell. For people that haven't come across us before, and I think there'll be a lot after our event last week with X Design, Colin, do you want to introduce yourself properly, and I'll introduce myself afterwards?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Cameron. Yeah, my name's Colin Riddell. I'm the co-host of this lovely podcast with the amazing Cameron Blackwood, and I'm a software engineer and technologist. I've been involved in various software engineering and technology things over the last 14 years in the industry. I've done a bit of like low-level stuff. I've done a bit of high-level stuff. I've been involved in product management stuff, and I've been an instructor in a coding bootcamp called Code Clan, which is based in Scotland as well. Um, and yeah, I'm just really chuffed to be on this podcast and help you out and um, all the rest of it. Cameron, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on board, and yeah, I appreciate you letting me, you saying yes when I asked you to be a co-founder.
Excellent.
And yeah, so for people who aren't familiar with me, my name's Cameron Blackwood. I've spent most of my career working between London and Scotland. I'm a former technical recruiter, but I've been a software engineer since leaving that field because, simply put, I was speaking to people that were having more fun than me, having more free time, and making more money. So I thought this looks interesting. Started writing code, fell in love with it, and after that, it was just a whole new world, which had plenty of bumps on the way. Like, I'm not going to try and um, delude anyone into thinking that it's a super easy journey as a career changer, but
Mhm.
it's one that's 100% worth doing if you find that you have a passion for coding.
Mhm.
Then I 100% implore people to do it. And today's episode is going to be actually centered around a blog that Colin has already written on our website, and we're going to talk about some insights around CVs or resumes for our American friends. So right, I think really let's go over the basics first
Yeah,
off. I mean, we're talking about a well-written CV here.
yeah.
Colin, what would you say is the like some of the really high-level points there? What would we look for?
Well, I guess it's good to just sort of hit the reset button and think about what a CV actually is. And you know, I've reviewed tons of CVs over the years, in both from the capacity of somebody who's hiring and in the capacity of somebody who is helping, like you know, bootcamp graduates and not only bootcamp graduates, but like degree graduates as well. And the thing we need to just keep in mind before we get to like any of the big takeaways is that a CV is just a document that's designed to like catch the attention of a recruiter, somebody like your former self. And I think the first mistake that a lot of people make, and as I say, it's not we've not even got to the juicy like really really juicy bits of feedback yet, and the juicy like the juicy points to make. The big thing is just to remember that like it's just a document that tells people that are reading it about you, right? It's just a document for communicating your skills and experience in such a way that somebody can quickly just look at that and figure out if you are the kind of person that they think might be suitable, right? Like I think a lot of people write CVs and assume that somebody's going to make a decision on whether they should hire you entirely based on your CV, and that's I think we all fall into that trap because and most of my advice and most of the things I talk about when I'm talking about CVs are based around the idea that people are trying really hard to like market their entire background, and really it's just a document. It's not any formal record of your achievement. It's not any like formal record of every project and every company you've worked on. Like if anything, it's the opposite of that. It's like a brief record, and it's designed to just like show people, to catch someone's eye, right? So, like, maybe you could tell me a bit about from what you're looking for, very, very high level as a recruiter, because I'm dead keen to hear what you think. You're looking through a pile of CVs, like what there must be some certain things that stand out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and especially about your point about how there's going to be a yes/no decision based off a CV. It's never
Mm.
going to be the case, ever,
Yeah,
ever. Like you'd be mad to run a business like that.
Yeah.
So what happens is typically in the modern world, let's say I'm recruiting for a junior Node.js developer. I'll put up the advertisement on LinkedIn or whatever job board, and then we have something in the background called an ATS, an applicant tracking system. So once I get an application through from them, it pops up on my ATS, and I can have a look at it. And I'll see the person's CV. Usually they'll answer some questions like, "Can you legally work in the UK or whatever jurisdiction?" What's your experience with Node.js? You might ask someone just to filter someone out who's chancing it a bit and has never heard of programming. And I'll be able to look at their CV. So from there, all I want to do is to have the key information conveyed to me very quickly. So all I want to do is just see the highlights, and that is all. That's all. So you just want to hit the main points, and that's why I think actually potentially leading on to another point, fancy, crazy layouts aren't actually really great in my opinion, and I think you just want to convey very quickly. It's almost like a written elevator pitch about who you are and what value you can add.
Yeah, totally. Like, what did you say the name of the software was that you used to do the thing?
So ATS is applicant
ATS.
tracking software, and the
Sounds
actual
mad.
software, I think the industry standard is like Workable.
Okay.
If you guys want to sponsor us, then please do. I think Workable is pretty good, and then there's like
ATS.
other ones like JobVite and stuff. Little tip actually, bit of a side note, but Workable has a very little publicized job board where you can search, like reverse search through companies that use Workable for a job you want, or you can go site Google, or you can go on Google and put site Workable and then
Oh
search for
yeah,
jobs that way. It's a little hack
that's very cool.
that I know about. So yeah, useful for anyone that's looking for that first job.
Yeah, good to know. I hadn't heard of these ATSs or whatever they're called. They're mad. So I guess getting into the more kind of really big points. There's basically three main points that we're going to kind of try and quickly, chat about to take away and have a think about, that you can also read about in our blog, thecodercareer.com/blog, and look for the article, The Well-Written CV. And the first point is that you should, that we see this all the time. People's CVs, they try and use like really, really like,
Like
I don't know what
grandiose
yeah,
language when it's not necessary.
yeah,
Do you know what, man? That's my pet peeve on like
yeah,
TikTok. I constantly see well-meaning advice, probably from
hmm,
people that are still university students, saying
yeah,
like, "Oh, you didn't stack shelves. You handled inventory transactions for a multi-billion-dollar corporation." It's like you don't need to say that. All you need to just say is, "I had to hit my targets." And I basically just had to work hard and like think on my feet and quickly do my job and do it effectively. That's all
hmm,
needs to be said. You don't need to like make the language overly complicated. Like
exactly.
it's just a bit, every recruiter can kind of see through it, and it's almost like people are like ashamed of working some kind of job like that. Like I worked in warehouses. I used to be a open top bus tour guide. Like I've had all kinds of random jobs,
Hmm.
and I would never like dress them up like really grandiose, but I would explain how hard work they were because they were hard work, and
Yeah,
I'm not, I wasn't insecure about it. So I think it's important to consider that.
I think we'll chat a little bit later as well about how much of your background, most I'm reckoning that most of our listeners are like, didn't go straight, not everyone, but most people probably didn't go straight into like their professional IT career.
Yeah, most people don't.
And yeah, most people go like, they've got a few years experience, and that's kind of where all of most of our advice that we're giving you here is the kind of advice that's like this, that comes from that kind of like way of thinking. It's not we're not assuming that people have went straight from uni to working. We're kind of assuming that slightly more of our listeners are have like diverse backgrounds in various different things, and that's where we can offer the most amount of tips and experience. And like, yeah, I just really want people to go out there and when they're writing that first paragraph of their CV, or if they're writing those, when you're writing the individual job experience sections, it's really important to try and not overly use like really fancy language. And we've got a couple of examples here. Like, I've got one here that we wrote in the blog. My ability to
I
demonstrate a
enjoyed that one.
keen and precise understanding of the intricacies of the aforementioned technology is evident not only due to the continued commitment to acquiring new experiences with it, But actually, if you just say, I had to become familiar with this tech really quickly, like it's
Yeah.
just so important to just try and not use fancy language. But I think there's always, when you're writing a CV, you're trying to impress the person that's reading it, right? But you should stop trying to impress the person reading it. If
You're not
anything, what
applying
you've
for a
got,
journalism job here. Like that's the thing. Like
yeah,
it's great that you can use all this stuff, but it doesn't matter. Like when it
yeah,
comes to coding, and the recruiter just wants to say, "Okay, can I use Node.js?" Yep, and then they just move on because they look at CV for like 10 seconds. Really,
yeah,
honestly.
yeah. What's the next tip then, Cameron?
So I mean, using too many words in general. Do you know what? In your blog, as much as I enjoyed that, I'm not going to
Yeah,
read out the whole thing because I think we'd
nah,
go
man,
well over the like scheduled runtime for this show.
nah.
But I think people can definitely check it out. Codercareer.com/blog. It's like you don't want to put too much. It's a pretty simple point and kind of related to previously, but that was more about the
Hmm.
language you're using, whereas this is about the sheer volume of what you're actually putting on the CV. You want to do that mainly for two reasons. One, obviously, the ease of just scanning it quickly as a recruiter and seeing the key parts. Maybe something as well is maybe put some bits in bold. Can be a bit controversial, but I like to
Good
put my
shout.
technologies in bold
Good
when
shout.
I'm writing things, just so the recruiter can easily look at it. And then also as well, just because you want to keep your CV down. Now, this is highly dependent on where you are from in the world. However, in the UK, I don't like CVs to go beyond 2 pages. In the US, it's a real rule where you have to keep it to a page, from what I
Oh,
understand. So,
right.
particularly if you're
That's
American,
interesting.
this is a really tough one. You've really got to be concise and think about how can I get this point across in as few words as possible, but also have those words have as much value as possible. So that's definitely something worth considering, particularly for our American listeners. And I
Hmm.
believe in some European countries as well, they're quite strict on keeping it to one page. And in the
I
UK,
didn't
it's a
know
bit
that.
more easy. The worst one the most bizarre one I saw was a guy who had a 7 page CV, and on the final seventh page was an incredibly compressed JPEG of what appeared to be his passport photo. So don't do that.
Oh my god. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's mad. I didn't know about the like almost like rules of it in the US, and I've heard the one page thing for years. And to be honest with you, like I'm not sure I fully agree with the one page thing. Like in my list of advice, I would never say try and keep it to one page. I think it's more important to try and keep the language short, because you could, for example, have a one page CV that has really long
hmm
meandering sentences that use too many words and use like crazy fancy language to try and make them sound like smart, which is what people think that you should do. Whereas I would say that if you just try and get your points across as concisely as possible in as small a sentences as possible, and try and not use like really overly fancy language, then you're gonna be able to achieve the task of what a CV is and communicate what your experience is. That's just keep in the back of your mind. That's what the document's there for. Imagine that somebody's charging you money for each word that you write. Like that's and I find that really hard, right? Like I find that, and I think genuinely it's one of the most difficult things to do is to take a paragraph of these words that you've like painstakingly tried to put together in a way that makes you sound absolutely awesome, but to then have somebody come over and be like, yeah, you need exactly half of those words, it can be quite difficult. Most of the feedback that we give to people on the Coder Career Discord, because we have a CV, and it's really lively there. Actually, we've got like a CV channel, a CV like channel, yeah,
yeah,
channel.
CV resume review, and massive shout out to Louise, who does a
Yeah,
lot of hard work reviewing those CVs for people. So
big
big shout out
time.
to her.
Like the biggest thing there is people coming on and they put out their CV and we look at them, and the first thing is usually like the first point is usually like take that section and just reduce the words. Now this is going to sound really lazy. It's going to sound a little bit mean as well, and it's really not meant as that. But generally, when someone sees a block of text, they don't read it,
hmm
right? Like they just skim it. They just skim it for like some certain keywords, and I think generally people like I'm just this is just anecdotal from my point of view. If I see a massive paragraph that goes more than like 4 or 5 lines, I tend to not read it. I know that sounds mad, but
I think
like
it's a normal reaction.
I think it is, and I don't think people realize consciously how little people read. And there's actually a really cool thing I was looking at recently. I think I saw it on Hacker News, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's a thing where that people have researchers have figured out if you put certain characters in a word in bold,
Oh, bionic reading.
bionic reading.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I'm not saying that you should. This is not advice to do that for your CV. I did consider
Well,
looking
I
into
think you
it.
should for technologies. I think you
Yeah,
should.
maybe.
Like,
Yeah,
get
maybe.
React in. Say it's a React job. Let's say it's a front end job. Get React in bold. Get Vue in bold. Get CSS in bold. Because that's
Yeah,
what
but
recruiters looking for.
that's just the whole word in bold. What I'm talking about is another thing, and I can't remember the name of it. And it's like part of the words in bold. And what you do is
Oh yeah, sorry.
you read the
Mhm.
paragraph, right? And your mind just like flies through it. Like I
Yeah,
can't remember what it's called. I'll maybe have a
it
quick
is called bionic
Google.
reading. This,
Right, it's
yeah, it's worth
so
people checking
cool.
out. It's very strange, but very
Your
cool.
mind just like flies through it. It's like incredible. Like I've never seen anything like it. Somebody popped it up on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and I
Yeah,
was
I keep seeing it on
quite
LinkedIn.
amazed.
It's
But
all those like
generally,
self improvement junkies are like start reading everything in bionic text.
yeah, generally the advice here though is for this point is like please fight the urge to just put tons and tons of words on there. And if you end up explaining like loads of stuff, just try and boil it down, you know. um just try and read it back to yourself and think, what are really the key points here? And I guess that's just really hard because you want to try and make yourself sound that you've got a lot of great experience. um um So yeah, it's pretty tough. Just try and read it back to yourself and
Mhm.
try and kind of summarize it to yourself in a way, and in a weird way. Like I know this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but like certain things about your CV, there people don't care about, and that's quite a difficult thing to say to somebody when when you're reviewing their CV. But generally, people usually take it pretty well, and we can maybe talk a little bit more about the kind of things that people care about later on.
See, I wonder if we'll disagree on this because
Mm.
I find hobbies and interests have
Hmm.
been something that has led to me picking up a lot of conversation with people.
Yeah, I
Like
like
the
that.
amount of times that like I've basically listed what rugby club I play for, and
Uh-huh.
like the conversation has turned into that, particularly in Scotland, where everyone knows each other in the Central Belt rugby scene.
Mm.
But
Hmm.
it is something worth doing. But do you know what's as well? Actually, something pops my head off, which we're about putting technologies in bold. Do you know a pet peeve of mine that wasn't in the? It's not in the blog post because I don't know if you agree with this or not. Actually, I really
Interesting.
don't like when people put technology and then they rate themselves out of 10 on that, or
All
they
right.
assign themselves a certain like arbitrary level because it's really
Yeah.
confusing to know what the scale is. Like I've
Yeah.
seen juniors put JavaScript expert. It's like, hmm.
Yep.
I've been doing almost exclusively JavaScript for like 4 years now, three
That
of
doesn't
which
mean, yeah,
commercially, and I'm not an expert.
absolutely. This is a really interesting one that people get asked in interviews. Just a quick segue before we talk about whether I agree with that or not. But like tons and tons of questions years and years ago used to be, oh, like how do you rate yourself in C plus plus out of 10? And it used to be that if it's too low, then you're not confident enough, and if it's too high,
You're too confident,
you're too confident because like
like arrogant.
apparently
That's
like nobody can
interesting.
ever be. But
I
in
don't
terms
like
of
those kind of questions.
no, no, those are awful questions. But in terms of doing it on your CV, I wouldn't agree with putting a number against it. But one of my favorite things to do, and we've not spoken about this yet, it's going to be on the next blog post about CVs, is to put like a little kind of very loose categorization with your comfort with that technology. And one of the
Mm,
reasons I really like it is, and I do it in my CV, as I say, like strong experience with like colon and then like Java, JavaScript, React, TypeScript. And those are the things that I'm like solidly good at.
yeah.
And then I'll maybe have like a section underneath it to say like still learning or like currently skilling up or like, you know, or have experience with or something like that. And then like
Yeah,
a
you
list of
could
the things
almost
that like I've
adapt. I was going to
done
say
in
you
the
could almost
past.
adapt like the language, like
Mm-hmm.
how people describe themselves as language as like fluent, um,
Yeah.
working proficient, work
Yeah.
like conversational and learning.
Yeah,
Um,
but I tend to do that. I tend to always have like at least a can like comfortable with, like really confident with,
yeah,
or strongly proficient with, or whatever language you want to use, just to say that like basically I'm using this every day. like I'm not an expert. I'm not saying that I'm an expert because nobody
Yeah.
can say that. Like nobody can say that you're an expert except maybe you're a very very few like handful of people in the world. But it is really good to say currently learning because that shows that you're like able to that you are learning and you're keen to learn and there's things you want to learn and that's one of the most important things to like get across in your CV and that's generally that even though it's not on that blog article because it's going to be on the next one because it's more about the structure of
Mm.
the CV. That's going to be one of my biggest pieces of advice is that that should be really really high up. It should be like basically it should the structure should be your little personal statement thing which is like very short about you and then like your the list of technologies that you're comfortable with. And then I would break that down into a set like two like main bullet pointed sections. The first section being like proficient with, and then the list of like the two or three or four things that you're like that you're using every day, and then underneath that currently learning, and then things that you're like currently learning that you're maybe like not as confident with. So, for example, like and for me, it would be like proficient with like Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, currently learning Terraform, Cypress, a bunch of things that I'm not as comfortable with every day, but like I'm picking up currently because that shows that you're actively learning, and like every single software engineer should be actively learning. Now,
Yeah.
we're not saying that you should be doing that in your own time. There's quite a lot of controversy around that actually, but you should definitely be picking up stuff in your job constantly and trying to learn as much as you can in your job constantly.
I would say I know this is a whole podcast in itself.
It is.
We have an interesting because I don't think we've actually said actually how much experience we have. You've got around 14 years experience, and I've got around 3.
Yeah.
So we're at quite different stages in our career. I would say
Yeah.
if you can do it, because I understand like some people cannot have any spare time outside of work because they've got
Mhm.
commitments or dependents or
Absolutely.
things like that, and that's totally fair enough. But if
Yeah.
you're able to do so, then I highly recommend. If you're in my kind of experience level, you really should at least put a couple of hours in per week. Like I do it
Yeah.
as well. Put in a couple of hours per week into learning something new. Your work should hopefully give you time to do it, but if
Yeah.
they don't, then try and do it yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the work point is really really important, particularly with the way people live and people have commitments, and not everyone can dedicate that time
Hmm.
to like spend time outside of work like coding. And I think for quite a while, like over the last couple of years, there's been a big like thing and oh you have to like live and breathe code and
No,
I
I
can't
hate them.
stand those LinkedIn articles that come out and like I coded every single day for a year and like here's like a screenshot of my LinkedIn like not my
Yeah,
LinkedIn
it's like
my
you want
GitHub.
like GitHub. You want to talk in inclusivity. Like,
Yeah.
how's that inclusive for someone
No.
that's a single parent and has got to look after
Yeah,
3
no.
kids? How are they supposed to code every day? They
These
can't.
those people can absolutely 100% still be soft like you can still be a
Yeah,
professional software engineer and not be coding every single night in your evenings. And I just want to
exactly.
make sure that like we're at the coder career we're as much as we are for like growth and everything and all the rest of it, like we are also massively in favor of like growing sustainably and not being one of these people that like you don't have to kill yourself to code or even spend
Absolutely.
any more time like thrashing it out like in your front room like as much as you can just to learn a bit extra and living it and breathing it and all the rest of it.
Mhm. I think
Um,
we're at about yeah. I like how you said the word sustainable. I think we're about
mm,
sustainable personal growth and development, and
yeah, definitely.
breaking into tech industry and selecting an employer that will allow you to maximize your personal growth whilst on the clock,
Yeah.
because it really is a win-win. Both of
Yeah.
us work for organizations to give us what you call 10% time, where we
Mhm.
get a day every fortnight to just work on our skills. And I've been working on Java, and I've been really enjoying it, and it's really helped me in my day
Yeah.
job, not just working on Java stuff, like thinking about how systems work. And I'm sure the back end developers that I work with are very happy with me because I'm more sympathetic to their problems, and
Mhm.
I try and write front end code that interacts better with the back end code. So
Yeah.
that's a very specific example, but you
Yeah.
should try and it's a real. This isn't a red flag, green flag podcast for employers because that's a whole blog post and podcast in itself. But if the employer gives you 10% time, that is a big old green flag. I would
Definitely.
say.
Definitely a green flag. It's also the sort of thing that like if you're not sure what to ask about in an interview, if you're at the sort of start of going for your first job, being able to sit there in the interview or in the Zoom and say, "Hey, do you have 10% time, and do you allow people to learn, and what training and options and various other things do you provide to and support do you provide as part of the role?"
Yeah, because some
Yeah,
places have
I
a
mean,
learning budget. Like at
yep,
my work, we
definitely.
have a Udemy, I think it's called, subscription,
Udemy is
which is quite
great.
cool. Yeah, you just access everything on there, which is awesome. Yeah, there's
Yep.
lots of companies have different approaches to it, but that kind of stuff is really
That was a
positive.
really good little not intended segue discussion because but I think it's really important to have. The next Let's move on to the next point. The next point is uh, is cliches, right? And this is one that
Mhm.
I get all the time. Um, what are your favorite cliches that you've seen in your CV and CVs you've looked over, Cameron?
That's a good question. Um, I mean, that's the classic hobbies and interests. I like reading and going to the cinema, which is
I like
actually no.
long walks on the
There's
beach and pina coladas.
somebody's added that to someone's added that from a CV template. You know that song Pina Coladas. That's
Yeah,
about having an affair. It's not a love song.
I know it is.
Anyway, that's a
Which is a
tangent.
love song
Yeah,
in some
well,
regards.
yeah, in a twisted way though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think there's a lot of cliches around. I mean, it's not on a CV, but this always brings me back to The Apprentice when they asked
Hmm.
that candidate in the boardroom. And for anyone who's not seen it, The Apprentice is a very silly UK show where Alan Sugar
Awful.
chooses. Yeah, but I can't stop
I
watching.
hate it. Oh,
When
really?
yeah, when Alan
Uh,
Sugar selects basically from a pool of 20 people, they get some investment. Anyway, they basically he speaks to this guy in the boardroom and he says, Jim, describe yourself without using any cliches. And he looks blankly at him and he just goes, I am what it says on the tin. Like, just stuff like that. Any kind of phrases. Talking about like punctuality. I know you put that in the blog, I think, talking
hmm.
about punctuality, like that's kind of expected.
Yeah,
And, hardworking. It's really meaningless because everyone says that. Like, think about, I mean, it's not even just about cliches. Just think about like, is everyone going to say this? Yes, then probably don't say it. And I think I probably can't give a better example than what you did in the blog. And if it's all right, I'll read it out actually.
absolutely.
Saying, I am a reliable, punctual, hardworking team player who can deliver results on time. I take my work seriously and can communicate well. I can engage with different stakeholders such as clients, managers, and co-workers. I can work in a fast-paced environment, big cliche, and learn on the job.
Hmm.
That's pretty much the perfect example. I couldn't think of a better one.
Don't do that. Basically, we're saying don't do that. If you
Yeah,
just
yeah, we're
like
saying
fast
don't do that.
forwarded, if you just fast forwarded and you hear
I
Cameron
hope
reading that
nobody
out, like
clips that. Yeah.
somebody's like, "Oh shit, I better get that in my CV ASAP." We're basically saying don't do that. Now, let me just try and explain why you shouldn't do that. Like, I think when you're at the beginning of your career and you're starting out and you're trying to build your CV, I think I think people just assume that you should put that stuff on your CV because I think people think that if they don't put that, then the employer, the prospective employer, will think that that person is not punctual and they can't deliver on time and they're not a team player and they can't communicate. But actually, like, and I can't emphasize this enough, but you're just wasting word space.
Hmm.
You're taking words that just do not need to be written down at all and writing them down. And the reason for that is because and I can't emphasize this enough, in a technical environment in a technical professional environment where people are working every day to try and work collaboratively to deliver software through like various software delivery techniques, whatever it is you're using, you know, but is a very complicated, technical achievement, requires a lot of like interaction and things. You kind of need these basics. You kind of need them. You need them so much that they're obvious prerequisites of being a professional. Full stop. Like they're so like underpinning to the whole thing of being a professional technologist that it sounds mental, but you shouldn't mention them. Like, and you might be thinking, what should I say instead? And what you should say instead is you should give examples of things that your achievements that you've done, the things that you've actually tried to do that highlight and imply those those qualities. So let's say you've worked in a Scrum team, right? If let's say you've maybe done a little bit
Hmm.
of that, or maybe you've done like a little bit of practice on Scrum when you were at a boot camp, or you tried to work in an agile team when you were at a boot camp just for your big project. Highlight that, right, and
Absolutely.
talk about that, right, and let the fact that you understand that and how that process works shine through. You'll get points there on a technical level to say this person understands what the value of that Scrum process is and the Agile process is. But you'll also get points to say like this person isn't as going down the obvious route of just saying, yeah, I work well in a team and I'm punctual. And actually, in a weird way, like working well in a team is higher in the pecking order of being punctual.
Yeah.
Like in a weird way, in a completely mad professional setting where people are trusted to do their job and trusted to deliver the results,
Which is
like
most tech companies.
which is most tech companies. Like being punctual is. I'm not right now saying, by the way, that you don't need to be punctual, right? Like what I'm saying though
Just
is
rock
that
up 15 minutes late to stand up
no,
each morning and
no,
see what
you should.
happens.
You definitely shouldn't do that, right? Obviously, but in a weird way, it's like the least. It's the least. It's the thing that people care about the least out of all
Yeah.
those cliched things. I'm definitely not saying that you shouldn't be punctual, but what I am saying is that you should try and explain the things that you've done and the things that you understand and the things that you've kind of worked with in a way that implies your punctuality,
Hmm.
implies the fact that you can communicate well, like, and somebody that has any like reasonable understanding of how teams work, which is hopefully most people, will be able to actually look at that and go, okay, this person is obviously fairly capable at being a human being. Because let's be honest, being punctual, being able to being a team player, um, somebody once years ago told me that those are the playground skills, right? You develop those skills, being able to work well with people, being able to communicate with people. You develop those as toddlers, right? And
Hmm.
then you spend the rest of your life as a human being trying to improve on those skills as much as possible. And some people do a better job of that than others, and we're always going to have people in teams that do a better job of that than others. But like, let's just make an assumption straight up the back that if you're a professional who's applying for a professional role, which even if you're coming out of a boot camp you are, then let's just assume that you've kind of got the basics, and let's make it so that you can use those word spaces, the spaces that you'd be putting those words in, to put something that's going to have a lot more impact on that CV, that's going to imply all of those things. And that's just really, really important. I cringe, but in a weird way when I see those words. But I also like get really happy because it's the easiest way to help someone with their CV, is just to be like,
Mm,
rip out all of those words. Like
absolutely. And it makes
you've
them
got,
stand out.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because a lot of CVs, I can say, like I've seen those cliches a million times, and
hmm,
it's one of those things where like it's a relief when you
yeah,
don't.
yeah,
Something actually you brought up was the speaking about the skills that you develop on a boot camp and within the agile framework. And something I actually really like is when juniors will talk about their boot camp like it's quote unquote real experience, like commercial experience, because it is, and it's the closest thing you have. And I think it kind of segues nicely into your next point about keeping the role history relevant. If
mm,
I'm recruiting a junior who's maybe come out of a boot camp, I would much rather have a long paragraph about their time at CoClam, for instance, than I
yep,
would about their time working front of house at Pizza Express.
yep,
No hate on Pizza Express, love it, but
absolutely,
just trying to think of a restaurant near my
yeah,
house.
mm,
But yeah, it's so much more relevant.
yeah. That's this is one of the hardest things to tell people, right? Because people, particularly if you're a career changer, and we know that a lot of you are, um,
And I am
y
as well,
yeah,
so
and you
I
are,
know
and
how
you
these people
are,
feel.
yeah, yeah. It's totally, totally, and it's tough because because you've spent a long time, doing a really good job at
Yeah.
lots and lots of amazing things. And the thing that's hard for people to do is some people say, and I only partially agree with it, that you should really, really. I only agree with it for certain roles and for certain things, that you should like ride heavily on your previous experience, and that's what sets you apart. I think that's true to some extent, but on the other hand, it kind of doesn't. I know this is very difficult advice to give, and I know that a lot of people might not agree with this, but on one hand, if you've got a background that's relevant to your technology career that you are in or that you're about to start or venture into, then you should definitely mention that.
Hmm.
You shouldn't, in my opinion, go into a tremendous amount of detail on it. It's definitely worth mentioning. If you have a background that's got not much relevance to what you're doing at all, you should mention it, but mention it in a lot more of a brief way, basically. And I think that's because um, it's basically people don't care. I know this sounds really
It's
harsh.
brutal, but it's
It's
quite
totally
true.
brutal. It's
Yeah.
totally brutal, and this is the hardest thing to give people advice on. I've seen so many CVs that are like that list, and this is an example that we've got in the blog post, list like every job they've had from like
Mm.
2020 all the way back to like 2000 and like 13, 2009,
Because by the
and
time you're in your 50s, your CV will go on for pages. That's the
yeah,
thing.
it doesn't make
With how our
sense,
generations
right?
are with
Yeah,
moving jobs. I mean,
yeah.
to give the listeners an example, I mean, I'm a career changer. So how I've handled this, one, I don't have my warehouse jobs or my open top bus stall jobs
Mm,
on my CV anymore,
yep.
just because they are 100% irrelevant. Obviously, they can see that I graduated university in 2016, but I didn't become a developer until later on. So
Mm,
what I have is I think I have I think I've written various technology recruitment and sales roles, more details available upon request. Um,
mm,
and I think on my LinkedIn, because you can be a bit more verbose, I still do list each individual one, but I don't leave any details. There was one particularly bad recruitment agency where I thought about leaving the details, as everyone makes mistakes, but I didn't want to get sued. So I've got like basically more details available upon request, or like one of them I've got UK employee number 4 because I was early there. And then the final one, Talent IO, I just explained, this is where basically I decided I want to be a coder. So it's,
yep.
I have stuff like that. But on the CV itself, it's just under one block. And if the interviewer wants to ask me about it, I'm more than welcome to. But I put way more depth into the programming work I've done.
That's a good point. I think that's the best advice. Um, it's I guess we want to give people actionable advice here. I hate it when people are like, "Don't do this," and then they never suggest what you should do.
Yeah.
So we're basically saying, to summarize this a little bit, we're saying don't give a massive list of all of your like all of the all of the restaurants and bars and shops and like marketing agencies and like whatever it is that you've done that's try and keep that list brief.
Yeah.
And if it's a really long list, just say various roles across. The example in the blog is like similar to your CV, Cam. Various roles across hospitality, retail, and
Mm.
business. Please ask if you'd like an insight into those. And
And you don't
and
need to shoehorn in technical stuff if there's no technical stuff involved. Like in your one,
yeah.
you do give a good example where if someone worked with a CRM system, that's probably worth them saying.
Mhm.
But this isn't a technical example, but this is when I did graduate recruitment, and somebody who'd done a degree in I don't want to accidentally dox this guy. He'd done a degree in, we'll call it Swedish. It wasn't Swedish; it was another European language. And he worked in a supermarket somewhere in rural northeast of England, and he said. A key role for me here was if a customer who could not speak English and only spoke Swedish would enter the store, I would be there to assist them. It's like that never happened. Like, don't just put like don't shoehorn in these random. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but like, don't shoehorn in random scenarios for the sake of it to like try and
Yeah.
say that I did this and I did that. If it's relevant to the technology industry, like for example, your example about the CRM system, like if you were maybe working customer service, that's worth you saying. But like shoehorning things in, recruiters will be able to tell if it's probably a bit of a stretch, shall we say?
Yep. Yep. I guess the difficult thing is for people that are doing this, that the experience is if it's not relevant, it's not relevant, and you just have to face that fact and just try and summarize it as briefly as you possibly can. Um, I've just written on the blog, like, the most important point here is the relevant part. For example, um, in a snippet that we've got there in the blog, the candidate had dozens of jobs, and as difficult as it may be, if the roles aren't relevant to your abilities as a software engineer, then you really need to try and narrow that down. Now, we've also got an example of somebody who let's say, for example, you're a bit like me, and you've been there in the industry for like more than 10 years. That is all. This advice also applies to that. Um, and the
Yeah, I
advice
was
here
going to
is,
ask you that. Like, what
yeah,
do you do about a role 10 years ago, and you've had three roles since, and you
yeah.
want to keep it down?
I think the best thing to do is to keep the roles that are closer to now, like
Hmm.
a little bit more, like, put a little bit more explanation into them. And the further you go back in time, just almost just be like, um just make it like really like one word, like, for example, 2009 to 2018, like, software engineer at Acme Co Limited, building like something, and then tech used
Yeah.
Java,
Yeah, always
JavaScript.
keep the tech used because
Yep.
not going too into depth on ATSs here, but you can like search for tech used on the ATS and that sort of thing, and never ever ever leave them out because you'll get missed
Mm,
by keyword matches. And in fact, on your LinkedIn as well, like I have it buried in my about me section. I have like a massive list of
right.
technologies. On the flip side, actually, let's say not to pick on PHP, but if you don't want to work with
Mm,
PHP anymore, which
hmm.
lots of people don't, you
Yep.
can remove that from your CV and remove it from your LinkedIn, and recruiters won't contact you about it. Little hack for you there.
Yep.
Um, the next thing that you've written on the blog is about star, and I like
Mm.
this a lot. I think it's a really good way of framing things. Do you want to explain about what star is?
Yeah, so star is a thing that's, I think, used a little bit more in interview techniques than it is in CV writing. But I think
Hmm.
people often, and the advice that I've read about online, and heard people talk about in various capacities, is that if you're talking about like something in your CV, you should you should present that thing as a situation that you've been in,
Hmm.
and then present the task that you then like try to take on as a result of that situation, and then what action you took to like address that task, and explain that, and then what the gain was from the benefit was from doing that action, the reward. So situation, task, action, reward, star. It's the star technique, and you can
Yeah.
just Google that star technique interview or star technique CV. It'll come up straight away. Now, yeah, what were you going to say?
Yeah, yeah. Listeners didn't see me like opening and then shut my mouth there, but I was gonna. I thought you were carrying on, but I,
Yeah.
I, I was gonna say always frame things in commercial terms,
Mm.
because yes, software engineering is a craft, but unfortunately, people don't always just pay you to be a great craftsman. Um,
Yeah.
so talk about the commercial impact, either how you made money for the company or saved the company money.
Yeah.
I reduced the AWS bill by 18%. I increased landing page conversion by 42%. Stuff like
Yeah.
that is great.
Yeah.
Get it in
Yeah.
numbers, quantifiable numbers is great. I understand that's not like possible for absolutely everything, but particularly
Yeah.
lowering cloud bills, companies will be very pleased to hear about that. So for sure.
Yeah. It's not possible to quantify absolutely everything you're
Hmm.
doing, but generally, if you're an engineer, or if you're doing something on any kind of team, even if it's a project within your like final project part of your boot camp or your degree, there's a reason you're doing it, right? So like, try and think about that. The example I've got there on the blog, which I highly encourage people to have a wee skim over and reread, is like, don't do, for example, responsible for building caching middleware using Redis and Java. The end.
Yeah.
Instead, do something like built caching middleware using Redis and Java. This delivered a 50% reduction in hits on underlying services and improved application performance. Now, even if you're only guessing, right, it's worth putting in. If you know exactly, then that's great.
Yeah, it's even better. But if you can
Um,
approximate, then it's still fine. They'll still be
so
interested in hearing about it.
yeah, and the thing about the star technique though is that I'm not huge on sticking to explaining a situation in detail, explaining a task in detail, explaining an action in detail, and explaining a reward in detail. I'm actually not a fan of that. So I say instead just do TR, task
Hmm.
reward. And I think if you do that on your CV, not not for everything, but like for some things where you can, if you can, then explaining the task and explaining the reward is enough to be able to be like, okay, this person's kind of got some understanding of why that team exists, or
Yeah.
what that team was trying to do, and that's at least so. But I'm really not a fan of like of going down the whole situation, task, action, reward. Some people even advise people to say like, I was in a situation where this happened, and then I decided to make myself this task, or as a team we decided to make this task, and then I took the following action. And you're like, oh my god, you're literally spelling it out. Don't do that.
Yeah.
That's not, to me, that's not the point of the star technique. To me,
I
the point
agree.
of the star technique is just to remind you to like, if you're saying I used this tech on this team, or we used like this authentication system on this team, and we done blah, then being able to go, we done blah because it helped with Z, then that's a benefit. You're seeing that you've thought about you're thinking about the overall product. And as I say, even if that is you're on your boot camp and you're doing a big project as part of your final project, and you're saying, oh, we used, as part of this, we used like Okta authentication, which meant that we didn't have to build authentication ourselves, which means that we're saving a lot of like dev time,
Mm.
and we're also like building a more secure system. Like explain to people why the decisions that you've made and the jobs that you've done, no matter how little they are, explain why that's useful.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, everyone hates building authentication. Uh,
So there's also that.
cool. And in terms of the last point is
Aye,
what makes you tick? Uh,
yeah,
It's interesting this because this is more of like it's adding a bit of personality to the CV, which
yeah,
I think is important, and it can get lost sometimes. And there's kind of
hmm,
paint by numbers fashion that there is in technology careers, and particularly for graduate tech careers. I shudder when I
big
go on
time,
like the Reddit, on the subreddits for like computer science careers questions, because these people do sometimes come across like robots. And I really like
big
that you've
time.
included this, because you
Thanks,
just
man.
want to explain your whys and what's it all about, and particularly for career changes. Like,
Yeah,
it's great to explain why you're interested in switching over. Like, what
yeah,
inspired you? Like, I was talking to someone at the meetup the other night. I say I was talking to someone. It was Francis. Now that I remember rightly, Francis was saying about like customizing like MySpace pages and that sort of thing, and that's what she enjoyed doing. And I
yeah,
think that sort of thing is really cool. Like, explain that sort of thing on your CV. Like that, it's
definitely.
great to have a personal story behind it. Like, that's exactly the sort of thing you want to have. Like, mine is a bit more like, yeah, I just thought it was more interesting, and I wanted to build solutions for myself. And I guess I also said, I want to be an entrepreneur long term. Probably don't put that on the CV, but it's really worth considering. And I really like you included this because it shows people are humans, right?
I
Humans
think
are people.
so. Humans are people. Humans are people. Coders are people too. People are humans. Coders are people or humans are too. I don't know. I'm getting
That's
losing
not
that.
going to catch on, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. No, the point here is that the biggest thing I think, and this is maybe a little bit more focused on career changers as well, is they make the assumption, and this maybe not just career changers, but just junior engineers and junior technologists, whether you're in your like year one, year two, year three of that journey, they in my opinion, they tend to not be that opinionated. And this is a really tough topic, opinion, right? Because when you're being hired as an engineer, like you kind of are you're being hired in a professional setting, and for the most part, they want the people hiring you want you to be able to have an opinion. They want to be able to say like, what do you like? What do you dislike? What do you love? Like, what do you hate? I know for a fact that if I'm looking for somebody to like come and work with me on a team, I I really want to know what makes them tick, right? Like because like no offense to anybody that doesn't like JavaScript, but like I need somebody that loves JavaScript, you know. I need somebody that like really likes Spring Boot, you know, in the teams that I work in, and really likes that whole thing. And like if you don't, then like no matter how good a coder you are, like I'm not really keen on hiring somebody that doesn't like quite like the tech that I need them to be able to help me with. And and that may be being a little bit picky, but the lesson here is having an opinion is important, but also at the same time knowing how to wield that opinion for your level and for your experience level is important too. So the the big one is just like tell me in your CV what you love. You know, tell me what is like what do you love doing? Do you love going into a team and rallying everyone uh, and being the person who speaks up for and gets behind and supports people in a more inclusive way? Um, are you the person who is gonna support people and help people and become an advocate for LGBT, like trans rights, all that sort of stuff? Are you going to be the person who does that? Are you going to be the? Is that what you love to do? If that's what you love to do, then tell us. If you're the person who like loves, absolutely loves like SAS, SCSS, you love that, can't get any more of that. Tell us. If you love Next, you know that's the thing that you like to get involved in. Tell us. Like if it's really important. I used to say to people, and it sounds a little bit weird, I used to say to people, like bleed a little bit, like let me hear you, let me hear the human. Like I'm not like I'm interested in if you can do the stuff, of course, but I also want to know what is really, really, really fundamentally making you tick. Like on a professional level, like I don't like I kind of want to hear a little bit about like what you like to do outside the work. Yeah, of course, because that's a little bit of context and insight. But I kind of gain a lot more from knowing your loves and hates. And then that makes me realize that you've got an opinion, and I kind of need you to have an opinion. And people that are looking for somebody to join their team, they need opinion. They need like, I think we should do it this way.
And don't be
You
afraid
know
to have an opinion as a junior either.
exactly, exactly, exactly. But if you're gonna wield opinion, you really do need to wield it wisely because it can be very difficult. You can get yourself in some difficult situations in teams if you're like overly opinionated. And the advice that people tend to give on this is to try because it is difficult, but try and hold your strong opinions weakly. You know, and that's not week. It's weak. You know, weak. Don't hold on to them tightly, and that's tough. Like that's really really hard. Like, um,
And people
particularly if you,
respect people that are willing to change their mind on
yeah,
things,
yeah,
not just
yeah,
in technology, but in life in general.
exactly. And I think this is probably like a whole other set of discussion. But if some just quick tips on that, if you do need to try and like hold your opinions more weakly, is that a word? More weakly,
Yeah, I think so.
weaker.
It'll do. Yeah.
Yeah, people know what I'm talking about. Then, bit of advice on that, just quickly, while we're talking about it, is figure out what your threshold of a thing is, right? So let's say you've got you've got a PR up and you've expressed an opinion, or somebody else has got a PR up and you've expressed an opinion, like figure out when you're going into that discussion. The first thing I think is, do I really need to say this, right? And have a think about that, and then think to yourself, what is my threshold? How much do I really care about this? Like, do I care strongly about it? Then think,
Mm.
why do you care strongly about it? And then think, what is the impact of that thing, like going in, and what is the impact of that thing not going in? Because most opinions kind of tend to be kind of come out around PRs and reviews and discussions about technology and discussions about how to push the product forward. And I think that if you just figure out what you need, right? And if you see something and you like really strongly disagree with it, just confirm with yourself: do I really really strongly disagree with this? Like, and what value
Yeah.
am I going to get out of disagreeing with it? And nine times out of 10, you'll end up deleting that comment and just being like, screw it. I mean, like, what's the worst that can happen? Now, that's obviously anecdotal, like depends on very many things. But even though we're saying here the advice is to tell us your opinions, we'll maybe get another podcast about doing how to do that in teams. But this advice for now is just on CVs, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's an example of like here's a good example of it, right? A little intro on someone. In my year of working professionally as an engineer, I realized that I absolutely love working with Next.js, right? That's really like just to quickly put an aside there. If I'm reading that and I'm on a team that uses Next, like this is a really good sign, right? If somebody says, in my year of working professionally as an engineer, I realized that I love Next.js. Because you need to, or even if you just like it, like I really like Next.js. I think it's really cool. This technology has me really excited for the future, and I'm really passionate about helping other people use it, or whatever. Just just tell us a little bit about how you feel about that thing, or it could be like um, that you're just really passionate about just generally helping people in the team. Tell us if something reads something along the lines of, in the first couple of years of my career, I've unlocked a passion for helping and mentoring others in my team. Like you have totally caught the eyes of somebody, and you're kind of punching it at mid level by by doing that and being and helping
Definitely.
people in your team, and like kind of heading towards the sort of senior level of being an engineer. Um, and if you can tell people what you love and what you don't talk about things you hate. Just don't go on your CV and be like, I hate JavaScript.
I've
Like
seen that before, and it's not a good look.
not good look. Yeah. So I realize I'm maybe going on about this pretty hard, but like, just give me a little bit of insight
Yeah.
into what makes you grow.
And one opinion that we do really care about is the opinion of our listeners. And
Yes.
so, what a segue. Spotify and Apple Podcasts do allow you to rate. And another thing as well,
Hmm.
if you want to hear more insights like this, and we mentioned a CV and resume review channel on our Discord. If you go to thecodercareer.com/Discord, you can sign up for free and get involved. We do also have a suggestions channel on Discord, which is well used by a lot of people who contribute to the show, and it is very important to us to get feedback because the show. I started doing this before Colin joined around a year ago now, and we've done over 40 episodes. And I like to think the quality's gone up, especially since you joined. Uh,
Thanks, bro. Thanks,
and a
bro.
lot of that is thanks to the kind feedback that the audience has honestly provided us. So we're really grateful for that. And if you're someone that's, I don't know, like a lurker who just listens to us but hasn't got involved in Discord yet because maybe they're feeling a bit shy about it, like just get stuck in. We'd love to hear from you, and any suggestions you have to improve the podcast, we'd be really keen, especially for topic ideas where
Yeah.
rather than just interviews, it's just me and Colin, because we're going to try and make it a ratio of 50-50 interviews to this.
Yeah, we're just going to try and have more chats like this as well. This has been a really good one. We're meant to only do it for half an hour, but it's been 58 minutes.
Yeah, we're running on an hour now, but
That's my fault.
yeah.
It always
No,
is.
it's mine as well. It's because you're there's so much good content, and would you believe that's only part one of three on the blog
Yeah.
post? So definitely
Yeah.
check out the blog for more. But yeah, we both really appreciate all the continued support, and it was so nice to meet some of you last week as well over at X Design, and we'll let everyone know like when the next event is, and we're really keen on doing more of that, and hopefully the video on demand
Yeah.
will be up roughly when this is out, I hope. We just need to get some technicals sorted. But yeah, thank you to all the listeners for tuning in for another week of the Coder Career. And yeah, happy coding. Was there anything else you want to add, Colin?
No, thanks everyone. Have a great
Cool.
whatever you're doing.
Have a great week.